And let's not forget the NI national insurance raid on the private sector that Rachel Reeves herself pointed out would destroy business schools, making them even more elitist. Our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die. I mean, they don't know whether they're coming or going. We are on the brink of world war, and frankly, not answering questions isn't good enough.
Remember when you believed in Keir Starmer's promises of a better Britain? When you trusted that Labour would bring the change we desperately needed? Now, as you watch your taxes rise and your hopes fade, you can't help but wonder, were we all fooled? Today, we're going to show you exactly how that trust was betrayed. Through the eyes of a relentless reporter, you'll see firsthand how the $22 billion black hole narrative was crafted to manipulate your fears and justify policies that serve the few, not the many. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Picture this. Rachel Reeves, Labour's Chancellor, stands at the dispatch box, her face a mask of concern. She's about to drop a financial bombshell that will send shockwaves through Westminster and beyond. With a steady voice that barely conceals her alarm, she announces a $22 billion deficit inherited from the Tories. The chamber erupts in a chorus of gasps and mutters. But hold on a minute. Something doesn't quite add up here. As Reeves paints a picture of fiscal doom and gloom, conflicting information starts to surface. Economic experts are raising their eyebrows, questioning the origins and accuracy of this massive financial black hole. How did it suddenly appear? And why now? The timing of this revelation is suspicious, to say the least. It's Reeves' first budget speech, a perfect moment to set the stage for Labour's economic narrative. But is it convenience or coincidence? As we dig deeper,
there were no answers. They don't ever answer a flaming question. But one thing is for sure, Rachel Reeves' disastrous anti-business budget is worse than anything.
Weeks ago, from that dispatch box, the Minister for Rural Affairs said that he'd been congratulated by a farmer over the introduction of the inheritance tax.
The plausibility of the claim starts to crumble like a house of cards in a hurricane. Respected economists are weighing in, and their verdict is damning. They're not just questioning the numbers, they're questioning the very foundation of Labour's economic strategy. One expert points out that the proposed rise in national insurance for employers could be a job killer, especially for small businesses already teetering on the edge of profitability. As the dust settles, the initial public and market reactions are rolling in.
Rachel Reeves is a disaster, and Keir Starmer's leadership is shambolic. That poor Liz Truss is often blamed for. In my view, Rachel Reeves must go. The other day, I went to PMQs, that's Prime Minister's Questions, and I can see why they call it that, because it was just questions.
And let me tell you, they're not pretty. Voters who once placed their trust in Labour are now scratching their heads, wondering if they've been sold a bill of goods. The markets, always quick to sniff out uncertainty, are jittery. But here's the real question that's keeping political pundits up at night. What's the endgame here? Is this $22 billion bombshell a clever political maneuver to justify unpopular policies, or is it a genuine crisis that Labour's inadvertently stepped into?
Because just yesterday, we had 10,000 farmers on Whitehall protesting against this madcap decision.
I mean, they don't know whether they're coming or going. We are on the brink of world war, and frankly, not answering questions isn't good enough.
So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this decision should be thrown in the trash can along with Rachel from account?
Just as the dust begins to settle on Labour's budget announcement, a chilling question emerges. What if the $22 billion deficit is built on a foundation of lies? one determined journalist is about to risk everything to follow the money trail, no matter where it leads. But in a world where truth is often the first casualty of politics, can she uncover the real story before it's too late? Meet Sarah Thompson, a seasoned financial reporter known for her sharp eye and unwavering commitment to the truth. When an anonymous source drops a bombshell about the Labour budget figures, Sarah's journalistic instincts kick into high gear. Despite her initial skepticism, she can't shake the feeling that something's off about this $22 billion black hole. As Sarah digs deeper, she quickly realizes this isn't going to be an easy story to crack. Government officials stonewall her at every turn, refusing to provide detailed breakdowns of the deficit calculations. Financial reports seem deliberately vague, with key figures conspicuously absent. It's as if someone's gone to great lengths to obscure the true picture of Britain's finances. Undeterred, Sarah employs every trick in her investigative arsenal. She pores over Office for Budget Responsibility reports, Treasury statements, and public expenditure reviews, searching for inconsistencies. She cross-references official claims against independent analyses and historical data, building a complex web of financial connections. As her investigation progresses, Sarah starts hearing whispers from within the corridors of power. Whistleblowers and government insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, paint a disturbing picture. They suggest that certain budget figures may have been manipulated to present a more favorable view of the government's financial health.
Of course, they didn't answer that question, so there's no point playing the non-answer. That was Lee Anderson asking Angela Rayner a question from the horse's mouth itself. They even evade questions that you would think it would be their job to answer. Now, the Labour government haven't got a clue how you or I really live.
One source even claims the $22 billion black hole narrative was strategically timed to justify unpopular economic policies. But it's a seemingly innocuous discrepancy in a Treasury report that really sets Sarah's alarm bells ringing. A footnote easily overlooked by most contradicts a key assumption underpinning the deficit calculations. As she pulls on this thread, the entire narrative begins to unravel. The truth, when Sarah finally uncovers it, is explosive. The $22 billion deficit, it turns out, is a carefully constructed illusion. Through creative accounting and selective presentation of data, Labour has grossly exaggerated the financial challenge facing Britain. The real deficit, while still significant, is nowhere near the panic-inducing figure presented to the public. While the public reeled from Sarah's revelations, seasoned political observers noticed something curious. Why were certain MPs suddenly changing their tune on economic policy? The answer would expose a web of alliances and betrayals that even the most cynical pundits never saw coming.
Their Westminster bubble insulates them from the real world, and I suspect they thought that their stonking majority,
when our economic recovery is not yet established or secure, and only adds to the pressure on businesses,
enabled them to carte blanche do whatever they wanted without our consent, things many of which they did not mention in their manifesto.
As Keir Starmer entered the parliamentary chamber, you could cut the tension with a knife. Opposition leaders, armed with Sarah's damning report, were out for blood. The usual murmur of conversation was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of papers, as MPs prepared their attacks. Starmer's defensive strategy quickly became apparent. He dodged direct questions, pivoting to rehearsed talking points about Labour's commitment to fiscal responsibility. But his evasiveness only fueled the opposition's fury. The British people deserve answers, not spin, thundered one Conservative MP, her voice dripping with contempt. As the session wore on, it became clear that Starmer's justifications for the $22 billion claim were paper-thin.
Which is why I suspect Rachel Reeves thought that she could get away with foisting this anti-business budget.
The decision to saddle employers and workers with the jobs tax takes money out of people's pockets.
Energy security with Ed Zero's nut zero, £22 billion energy policies, the same size as the supposed black hole.
He repeatedly cited unforeseen economic challenges and inherited financial mismanagement, but provided no concrete evidence to back up these claims. The more he spoke, the more it seemed like a desperate attempt to cover up a massive miscalculation, or worse, a deliberate deception. The political motivations behind the $22 billion figure were becoming painfully obvious. It was a convenient boogeyman, designed to justify unpopular tax hikes and spending cuts. But now that the truth was out, that strategy was backfiring spectacularly. Reactions from across the political spectrum were swift and brutal. The Conservatives, predictably, called for Starmer's resignation. But even traditional Labour allies were distancing themselves.
Energy policies which make us all poorer, with the con that is carbon capture.
Despite all of their election promises to cut national insurance contributions, they're actually raising them.
Schools making them even more elitist. Our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die.
Trade union leaders expressed deep concern over the budget's implications for workers, while left-wing MPs openly questioned the party's direction. As the controversy snowballed, political analysts started speculating about the long-term consequences for Labour's credibility. This could be the beginning of the end for Starmer's leadership, mused one commentator on BBC News. How can voters trust a party that's willing to manipulate financial data for political gain? The fallout from this debacle was reshaping political alliances in real time. Moderate Labour MPs were seen huddled in intense discussions with their Conservative counterparts, while grassroots Labour members took to social media to express their disillusionment. The once solid Labour coalition was fracturing before our eyes. As the dust settled on this explosive parliamentary session, one thing was clear: the implications of this controversy would extend far beyond a single budget. The very foundations of UK economic policy were now in question, and the aftershocks would be felt for years to come.
This is why it is so worrying that at this crucial time, the Prime Minister and Chancellor concocted a new jobs tax.
And let's not forget the NI national insurance raid on the private sector that Rachel Reeves herself pointed out would destroy business.
While politicians traded barbs, the real victims of this deception were emerging, and they weren't who you might expect. The ripple effects of Starmer's $22 billion claim were about to hit British businesses in ways that would shock even the most hardened economists. As the dust settled on the budget controversy, economic experts began sounding alarm bells about its impact on market confidence. Reports indicated that the private sector had shrunk to its lowest point in 13 months, suggesting a troubling contraction in economic activity. This wasn't just a political scandal anymore. It was threatening to derail the entire UK economy. The situation became even more complex as conflicting economic projections emerged. Some analysts argued that the budget measures, particularly the rise in national insurance for employers, could lead to widespread job cuts and reduced hiring. Local shops and care homes, already operating on razor-thin profit margins, were particularly vulnerable. Others maintained that the government's approach was necessary to address long-term fiscal challenges, even if it caused short-term pain. As experts debated the potential long-term consequences, a chilling possibility emerged. If growth was stifled, the UK could be heading for a prolonged period of economic stagnation. The spectre of years of sluggish growth and declining living standards loomed large, reminiscent of the lost decade some countries experienced following financial crises. Historical examples painted a sobering picture. In countries where governments faced backlash for fiscal mismanagement, the results were often catastrophic. Reduced investor confidence led to economic downturns, creating a vicious cycle of declining revenues and growing deficits. The UK now teetered on the edge of a similar precipice. As the gravity of the situation became clear, attention turned to potential policy changes and economic interventions. Could the damage be contained, or was it already too late? The coming weeks would be crucial in determining whether the UK could regain its economic footing or if it was destined for years of financial turmoil. Amidst the uncertainty, one message from economic experts rang clear. Transparency and honesty in financial reporting were paramount. The government needed to avoid deceptive practices in economic forecasting if it hoped to restore public trust and stabilize the economy. The road ahead would be challenging, but rebuilding credibility was the first essential step towards recovery.